We only have one life, and we've really got to make it good. Now, how many of us have ever felt trapped in a job we hated?
And I'm honored to stand next to Hap Klopp, who started North Face.
What's going through your head? What are you looking at the business and saying, where am I going to take this?
Well, the simple answer is there wasn't much going through my head. So
that means that you don't just rely on the vendors, Abercrombie and Fitch next to American Eagle, next to Hollister, next to North Face, next to somebody else. You actually have to coordinate with them. So suddenly the owners have to be partners.
Hello, everyone, community of El Club del 1%. I'm very excited. This interview is like thrilling for me, mind-blowing. Perhaps I'm here with a very, very special international guest. Hap Klopp, who has an MBA from Stanford University. He is best known as the co-founder and former president of the North Face, the North Face brand, the one I'm having here representing. It's a firm that created the standards for innovation and quality in the outdoor. Last year, yes, for insights, the North Face parent company revenue was over $11 billion with over 6,000 employees. The company during his tenure grew from back room of 14 people to the company now that, like I said, currently employs more than 6,000 people. Hap is currently working in consultancy industry and is active board member of several innovative and disruptive companies that I would like to speak about some of them which are still related to the fashion industry, interestingly enough. And thank you very much, Hap, for accepting this interview and for inspiring all the Spanish-speaking entrepreneurs who are listening to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge. Wonderful to be here.
So, Hap, I would like to start basically with a brief history of how was it like founding the North Face back in the day. Were you an entrepreneur ever since you were born? How was this this history?
It's a good question. And yes, I was an entrepreneur ever since I was a boy, but it's a lengthy path that went there, but I just didn't follow the route that anybody else did. At school, I didn't go to school full day. I went only half day, and I did directed reading and things like that, probably because I was too disruptive. But so I always kind of followed a different path. And then I ended up, when I was at university at Stanford, my father died, and I was running a family company that made wood windows, frames, sash and door. We put windows in the Empire State Building and a number of other major buildings, but we're quite small. And I was going to school and I was running the company simultaneously, and I concluded that we weren't large enough to be successful, and we're going to have to do a lot of changes to be able to do that. We're going to have to raise tens of millions of dollars to expand purchases of materials and timber, so we would have to move the facilities, have to change all the management. And that was kind of daunting for somebody 20 years old. So I decided that I would sell the company and get my MBA doing it. And I sold the company while I was getting my MBA at Stanford. And then when I left there, I figured, well, somebody had offered me a job to run their company. Here I'd have a Stanford MBA, and I'd run a company, but nobody offered me that job. But I developed a lot of views about what I thought businesses should be. I thought businesses could change the world. I thought businesses should change the world. And being in the outdoors, it resonated with me how wonderful that experience was. And I read something when I wasn't going to class. I read something by Thoreau, transcendentalist, saying, "And wilderness is the preservation of the earth." And I really felt that. And I felt, whenever I went out in the wilderness, I really felt something that connected with me. And I had this belief that if you could send a lot of people out there, they would come back and be better stewards of the earth, and all the urban problems that existed go away when you leave. So anyway, that was in the back of my mind. But I believed, when I developed these strategies, that I believed in a company that made a product that never went into a landfill. I believed in a company that, because of the jobs I'd worked in, that where you wouldn't really discriminate against anybody from wherever they were. At that time, women were paid half of what men were paid. It didn't make any sense. People from all over the globe were good workers, but if they didn't speak English very well, then it was a bit of a problem. And sexual sexual orientation limitations. So I saw all of that lunacy that was existing in the business world, and I didn't. It just was common sense. It wasn't the right thing. So anyway, so nobody was offering me a job, and so I finally decided maybe what I'd do is what all people that get MBAs do, who think they're entrepreneurs: get a job with a big company, and on the side look for what you're going to do. I didn't like that idea, partly because I thought it was a little disingenuous to take a job with anybody and not really plan to be there. I also, I really didn't see a lot out there that resonated with these ideas I've been talking about. But anyway, I interviewed with another companies, and ultimately the interview sent me into doing something on my own. And the one that was really the pivotal one that changes an interview with Procter and Gamble, the company located in Cincinnati, Ohio. And the old joke about Cincinnati is that if I were if I were to die, I want to die in Cincinnati because everything happens 2 years later there. I mean, it was kind of a slow environment. Anyway, I was invited back there, and here I've been in this fast-paced environment. I was running a company, flying back and forth 900 miles away while I was getting things at Silicon Valley. Even then, it was hectic and whatever. And it's a little sleepy back there, and the company doesn't, it's making throwaway products, it's putting them into landfills and whatever. But I interviewed, and it was an 8-hour interview, and the first hour was with the HR department, and they sort of explained what the environment was. The first question, he said, "Is your name Kenneth or is it Hap?" And I said, "Well, it could be either one, but most of my friends call me Hap." And he said, "Well, when you work here, it'll be Kenneth, because nicknames don't give you the gravitas to manage older people, and you will be doing that. And you need to be wearing a white shirt and a tie." Well, as you can see from what I'm wearing right now, I don't believe in white shirts and ties, and there's no productivity analysis. And so, I know I'm in the wrong place. And then he asked the question that everybody hears in an interview. He asks a searching question that thinks very deep, but you've heard it 100 times, which is, if you're to join our organization, where do you envision you will be in 5 years? And knowing I was out of there, I said, well, and I'd like to underscore, if I were to join Procter Gamble, I expect to be president in 5 years. And that means passing you in 5 minutes. But I don't think that's any big deal. Anyway, the remarkable thing is that they offered me a job. But the reality was, it was a very good interview. I make light of it, but the reason it was a good interview is he usually, when you interview, people ask you what you want, and they say, "Oh, that's what you're going to get here," and then you join, and sort of osmotically over time, it dawns on you much of that isn't true. He was telling me what it was like and allowing me to make the choice of what was there. And seeing that, I realized, I couldn't work for anybody else. I had too much hubris. I was too outspoken. I had ideas that were not connecting to the way the real world was. And so if you can't work for anybody else, what you need to do is start your own business and put your own ideas into it, which is what I did. And I chose something I knew something about, which was the outdoors, because when I was growing up in Spokane, Washington, that's what you do in your spare time. And that's what I'd experienced. And so I thought I'd put all of these ideas into the North Face, and we would see how large it could be. Never thought it would be $1 billion company. We were happy if it was 10 million or 100 million, but the world came around to our way of thinking.
That's why actually I was going to ask you something in regards of the last thing you said, which you previously said that you decided to sell the family business because you saw it wasn't scalable enough. So I wanted to ask you, when founding the North Face, when taking the risk, what were your ambitions in that precise moment? Like, did you envision you were going to build a multinational brand, and you envision you were going to change the world? My question is, what were your ambitions, and also what was your main purpose with building this business?
Well, there was a story written about us, which is a little stretch. They called it the Scotch story, but they said I was drinking Scotch, but I was actually drinking beer. But, we we're talking about the idea. And at first we said, well, we'll develop this little company in Berkeley. And it sounded pretty good. And after a couple beers, we said, well, why don't we make it a national company? After a couple more beers, why should we limit it? We like to travel. Let's make it a global company. And that was kind of our thinking. But I mean, the reality was, I had those ideas that I talked about. They're idiosyncratic, but I believed that businesses could change the world, and I believed that they should. I was located in Berkeley at that time, and the free speech movement was impacting the entire world, and I could see what a few people could do, what a small company could do. So the goal was to do something right, and by doing it right, the world would see and follow it. So we're an environmental company from the start. We put a lifetime warranty on our products, and that served two purposes. The first one was that if you're an outdoor person, you never want your product to fail because your life could depend on it, but it also would never end up in a landfill. Environmentally is better than being made out of recycled materials as a way to do it. And so and all of these ideas of being inclusive and hiring, a way to do it. As I said, women were paid half of what men were paid at that time. It's still only 80%. Why not hire anybody, no matter where they're from, no matter what their language was? We spoke 14 languages or dialects at all time in our company. And so the idea was to use the company for good, to be able to facilitate it with the overriding idea of sending people deep into the wilderness so they would come back better stewards of the earth. And the simple idea underneath North Face, at first we made tents and sleeping bags and packs, is we wanted to make it so lightweight that it was easy people to go in there, because prior to the time we founded the company, most of the product was heavyweight camping product that people only took 100 feet off of the road. And we found and repurposed materials from the Vietnam War. We took aircraft aluminum and made tent poles and pack frames. And we took sleeping bags that we made out of parachute cloth. We also made tents and some funky clothing. And by making it so light, people could go into the wilderness. We knew if they did, they were going to come back and they were going to affect the world. And by setting up a company that was principled, we thought we'd set a standard for a lot of other companies across the world.
Yeah, we could agree that, like, amazingly enough, like, you have this vision of building a global brand, and also the employees like were global, like it was all going on. My question to that regard, I want to ask you a couple of broad and open questions so you can answer the way you most like, but what would be the key ingredients to build a global brand, an international, impactful brand?
But people think brands are logos and their taglines, and you need those so people know what to reference. But a brand is really your DNA, what you stand for. It's your qualitative aspects of your company. And so you need to consistently come back to those. And I used three words that were in the back of my mind all the time. They were quality, disruption, and triple bottom line. By triple bottom line, I'm talking about an equal commitment to the people, to the environment, and to society. In terms of disruption, I thought the world was going to continuously be disrupted. As I said, we took materials from the Vietnam War, disrupted the camping business. In terms of quality, we made the best. We put a lifetime warranty on it. Always had those. And when you have those rules, if you persistently and consistently go forward, you grow and grow and grow. And brands are like coral. Coral grows, you don't see it changing day to day, but if it has rules that it follows consistently, it gets bigger and more complex and more beautiful until at some inflection point, everybody notices it. And that was a global brand is about. So persistently and consistently articulating the DNA of the company internally and externally, and then basically use storytelling to be able to get those points across to other people, because storytelling is more memorable than rote memorization.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I also wanted to ask you another question regarding, I think that most successful or all successful businesses are in regards of also the people, the employees, like the stakeholders in general. And I find it, for me, like, amazingly from Spain, like, one of my obsessions is to read biographies, to read about successful entrepreneurs, and most of them have come, I've seen this pattern from this small area in California, the Bay Area. So I wanted to ask you, is there like this concept of Silicon Valley, which is a little romanticized, or as we see it with like the American dream? is it true? Is there a network effect? Like, why is this area so magnetic for business creation? And I don't know, what do you think about, like, did it help you to be in that area specifically, or
For sure it did. I mean, it's not the water that we drink or anything. It's beautiful, uh, beautiful bay that's there, and that attracts people. But uh, beyond that, there's a couple of things that happen. First of all, the the area of this country that we're in was founded many years ago in 1848 by the discovery of gold. And when gold was discovered, people came from all over the world risking everything to get rich. And they came there, and even to today, that mentality exists out there. Now, there's a couple of things that are associated with it that I believe, and I try to put forth as being differentiators. The first one is the ability to fail. In Silicon Valley, failure is actually prized, as opposed to something that you fear or that would ruin your career. And if you look at Steve Jobs, he was kicked out of his company. Mark Andreessen, founder of Netscape, he was kicking out of his company, but he ended up running the biggest venture capital firm out there. Jack Dorsey was kicked out of Twitter and brought back. In Silicon Valley, what's recognized is that failure is an inevitable part of a career. And if you learn from that, you grow and you're more valuable. So once it's okay to fail, then you can set really extraordinary goals, because the way to avoid failure is setting very modest goals. You'll attain those, but you're not going to change it. Well, certainly the biggest opportunity for failure is entrepreneurism. 80% of companies that started or failed. And so if you're afraid of it, why not go work for a large company? It's embraced here that you can do that. So failure is one thing. And the second thing, of course, which has helped modern day, is scalability of a business. Scalability at a very fast pace. And there are lots of people and there's lots of infrastructure here that help companies grow. There are attorneys, there are accountants, all of whom will take you from the start, either on a pro bono basis or take options in your company and ride with you the entire way until you're an IPO or whatever. You don't find that in a lot of other places. So if you take the history of people that came here for the risk, if you take the fact that failure is okay, you add to that the infrastructure to be able to grow, and then it is a beautiful place for people to come and live, all of that creates a nice crucible to be able to grow that. Now, it isn't the only place in the world that's beautiful, and it's certainly not many of those ideas are transportable, but a lot of cultures do not accept failure. A lot of cultures do not accept the hubris associated with the people that you see in Silicon Valley.
Totally. And I think this message should reach important decision makers, governments in Spain, because culturally failure is not seen as something positive rather than negative. No, keeping it broad, from that same area, and you as one of the precursors, what would be 3 ingredients or 3 things every entrepreneur, innovator needs to change the world?
I think they're pretty simple. I mean, the first one is you have to have a vision of what the world's going to be. You don't just change what you have to change towards something. And you have to have an idea of what that's going to be. And when we started North Face, we had the idea of an inclusive world that was environmentally friendly, that would hire anybody anywhere and give dignity to people. The triple bottom line, this commitment to sustainability, commitment to people, and the commitment to educating our own people. 11 of the people that worked for me at the outset of the company ended up running other companies in the outdoor business. And I told them, you may not get rich working here, but what you learn here will allow you to do that. So somebody that started with me started Mountain Hardware. Somebody else ran Patagonia's International. Another one set up a women's athletic line called Title IX. Another one ran a company called Thule Ski Racks and whatever. But All of those things are there. So what you need is the vision. Then the second thing you need is optimism, because you're going to encounter setbacks all along the way. You're going to have black swan events. You're going to have things like COVID. You're going to have, financial markets and crises and whatever. And if you're optimistic, you can see over the hill. And those are just sort of hiccups along the way. But if you're a pessimist, you won't see that, and you'll fold when those things happen. And then the third thing you have to have is a passion for it. I mean, you just can't be academic. You have to, be all in, and you have to do that viscerally. Just believe in what you're doing, and it's so exciting to you that people will follow you, because people don't follow people really. They don't follow what you say. It's been said that when you speak, only a third of what you say is ever remembered if you're really good at communicating. But what they remember is your passion, and they remember your commitment. And so you need to have that. So to all the stakeholders you come across, and whether that's your employees, whether that's your customers, whether that's your investors, all those stakeholders need to feel that passion.
Wow, something almost intuitive. I want to jump back to another subject. I know you are a great professor academic in Hull University, great for entrepreneurs. And I was wondering, how do you see in general the education system? I heard in one of your talks, you also mentioned maybe there's an educational crisis. How can it improve? How do you see that in broad area?
Well, to start with, it needs to change. As you can see from the name above me, the three amigos, three of us teach together. We do research together on the future of education and whatever. The reality is that education is probably the slowest thing to advance because of a variety of things. And yet the world is changing, and you have to be able to adapt to it. One of those issues is that a traditional college education of 4 years really doesn't meet the needs of a lot of people. It's been said that anybody who graduates from school now is going to have 12 jobs in their life. Well, that implies a lot of reskilling and upskilling. It means you're going to have to go back. It means that rote memorization that's out there is not going to help you in tomorrow's problems. I think there was a U.S. baseball player, Babe Ruth, who said, yesterday's home runs don't win today's games. But I mean, it's really effectively true. But the reality is tools like AI are basically making the way that we've taught in school obsolete. The people that are rewarded in school generally are the people who are very good at rote memorization. And oftentimes you don't remember for a long time, but if you remember long enough for the test, you score well and everybody gives you a good grade. But the reality is, with something like AI, there's no reason to know everything. The reason is to know how to query it, how to ask for it. So we're going to have to teach people how to ask for things. We have to teach people to look for what they're getting out of their education other than a certificate, because a certificate alone is not going to be there. And now I'm talking about a certificate, I'm talking about a diploma, and it helps maybe in your first job. If you go to a good university or a great university, that will probably put your CV ahead of somebody else. But then pretty soon it's, what do you do on the job? And people kind of forget about where you came from, and they're asking, what are you doing today? So we're going to have to continually educate. We're going to have to create universities that continuously educate people as they go along. And we're going to have to start teaching things in a way that people learn how to ask probing questions, not rote memorize.
How do you think it's going to be like the future classroom? How is it going to look like? Are the students going to be led by AI and mobile phone use, which is prohibited in most academics, or how do you envision that?
It's going to be hybrid for sure. Some people are going to be in the classroom, some people are going to be outside, and the people are outside maybe inside some of the time and outside some of the time because their life, they have to go to the doctor and they can't come in today. Well, that doesn't mean they shouldn't miss a class. And there are going to be things like COVID again that'll probably happen, and so people are going to learn. There's going to be people who economically can't afford to move someplace. If you look at where there's growth around the globe, it's India, it is in Pakistan, it is in China, it is in Africa. They need to build 60,000 universities to give university training. Well, that isn't going to happen. And in some of the places, and US is an example, Italy and some places Europe, where actually population is declining over time. So we may, and cost of universities are going up. So it's, so the solution to it is to put some people in the classroom, some people online to develop the tools. And my research group is working on them. In fact, later this morning, I've got a meeting about the classroom, but it's going to have screens, it's going to have interaction, it's going to have new software that's out there and the ability to deal with it. And one of the things which I've found is that if you can collaborate with people, you can move much faster than if you move individually. And if that collaboration is global, which is easily done with the electronic tools we have now, you're going to advance greatly.
Nice. I'm hyped to see that new classroom you guys are designing. Congrats on that. Two more brief questions on two different subjects. I would like to know, me as a young entrepreneur, and for all young entrepreneurs who are struggling, starting, what would be the startups? Why do most startup fails, and what would be the main rookie mistakes? Let's put it like that most entrepreneurs commit, and what advice would be to those entrepreneurs?
Well, I could go on forever on that, but the reality, the first one is don't fear failure. That isn't advice other than it will happen. 80% of them fail. So if it doesn't work, go on to the next one. But I think the three things that probably you could say, the first one's timing. And timing can't be taught very easily. But if you're too early, you run out of capital before the market ever recognizes you. And if you're too late, you just get scraps because somebody takes over. If you look at the computer industry as an example, there were two waves. One was kind of all of the tools and the network and whatever. All of the big players and winners there, you think of Microsoft and Gates, you think of Andreessen at Netscape and whatever, they were born within a 3-year period of time between 1953 and 1956. When you looked at the next wave, which had to do with internet and browsers and all of that, all of the people that won in that, thinking of Larry Page and Sergey Brin at Google, you're thinking of Steve Jobs at Apple, they were all born in a 3-year period of time in the 1970s. And all of them that I mentioned dropped out of school. They dropped out of school because they were so close to the market that they knew it was the right time. They knew if they waited and got an education, but they would miss the whole opportunity of a lifetime. So timing is the first one. I think the second one is the expectation of overnight success. Every overnight success takes years, whether it's a band that's making music, whether it's a company that's starting, you see it and you think, oh, it just started yesterday. And we talk about AI. That's because generative AI came out with ChatGPT in November of last year, but it's been around for 30 years. It's been used in incipient voicemails and things like that, but suddenly it broke out there and it's going to be applied in a variety of ways. There's some inflection point that does that. But the reality is if you expect it overnight, then you don't have the strength to be able to put up with all of those hiccups that I talked about and the negatives out there. And so people, if they expect something overnight, their business plan probably leads to the third problem, which is they run out of cash because what happens is they underestimate that usually takes twice as long, costs 3 times as much as you think. And if you don't have a backup plan, a plan B, you're not going to be there when the opportunity is there. And then maybe the fast followers win because they come in, they take your idea and and you sort of fail.
They execute on your mistakes could be. To finalize, I would love to know also your philosophy of life or the philosophy that you have brought into your ventures, your companies. Also, you mentioned optimistic, pessimistic. I would also like deep into how do you overcome if you're pessimistic, and I don't know, in general, how do you envision life in general?
Well, I'm an optimist by nature, and I think some of it's genetic, to be very honest. But I think if you read, if you travel, if you go into the wilderness, you're going to come back. If you read the newspaper every day, all you read about is crisis. You read about the economy, or there's the economists are predicting that we're going to have an economic collapse or whatever. All of that sort of seeps into you. So you need to step away from that. You need to look at other things. You need to look at and recognize, one, there's cycles in economics. There's a cycle in business. There's a cycle in life. And if you're in a down period, you realize that there's an up period coming there. Somebody once told me that, the great salesman is a salesman who realizes that they're going to get turned down 5 times. So when they have the first turn down, the first no, they know they're getting closer to the yes. They know they only have to do 4 more times and they're going to get there. And so sort of that optimism, I think, is out there. But, there was a great quote which I got from somebody, and I've sort of adopted it as my belief. And it said, there are people who make things happen. There are people who watch things happen. And there are people who ask what happened. And I always wanted to be the person who made things happen.
I subscribe on that last one. Thank you very much, Hap. Before I leave you, I would also like to know, I'm gonna plug in all your social media, LinkedIn, where people can find you, but I would like to concisely talk about your present ventures, the Three Amigos initiative. I know you have some interesting ventures also, your active part in Chile even. You can briefly synthesize what you're up to currently.
Well, there's 3 things. As I said, I teach among the Three Amigos. We teach, we do research, we do a podcast, we do a master class. Would love to have people join, but it's all about the future. We're talking about disruption. We talk about what you haven't anticipated, whether it's the classroom of the future, it's work of the future. We teach innovation and entrepreneurship. Then I engage myself in entrepreneurship and whatever. There's a company, as you mentioned, out of Chile. It's called Spora Biotech. And what they're doing is they're working with mycelium, which is the root structure of mushrooms. And they go into the Amazon, they go into Patagonia, and they search for new species of that to be able to make it into end products. And the first end product, which we're focused on, is a replacement for leather, because leather is a very environmentally damaging product. It is very inefficient when you make leather, because it takes 3 years for cattle to grow to the right level. The cattle take a lot of land while they're doing that 3 years. They're farting and belching methane into the air, which is greenhouse gas. Then when you process it, there's a lot of wastage, and then you use cremation to tan it, and it's the 3rd most polluting industries. We can go in, take a sample, and bring it back to the lab and grow it in the lab. It does a lot of things. One, it comes up with an economic reason to preserve the wilderness, going back to what I was talking about at North Face. Also, you want to preserve the indigenous cultures that are there, because these people known for thousands of years what some of these plants will do. So while we're discovering other plants that can grow into a variety of different businesses beyond leather and other things that are biotech, we preserve that economically. We create a product which can go back into the land perfectly, and it replaces leather, which is environmentally damaging. So that's one, and that's out of Santiago, and the company Spora Biotech. And then another one is a democratized healthcare company called Revive. We work with IV drip therapy. We also would do genetic testing to be able to tell people what they're doing. Right now, the cost of healthcare is way too expensive. In the United States, is 17.9% of the GDP. In Europe, it's about 10%. The difference, private spending. But none of that's solving it. And the reason is most healthcare costs are after you're ill or at the end of life. If you can do preemptive healthcare, if you can deal with things early on, the costs go down dramatically. And by understanding what your genetic makeup is, and there are things like the French paradox, and people say, how can they have all of these rich foods? It's because they're genetics are such, the people in the Savoy region of France have lived with that for years, and the Mediterranean diet works for people out of the Mediterranean area. A lot of this comes from the genetics. So what we're doing is expanding clinics all over the globe. One, we study the genetics, and then we actually give drip therapy, IV drip therapy. We can tailor to your needs. If you want health, if you want skin tone, if you want cure for hangover, any of those things you can do as you're going there. So those are a couple of the things I'm working on, and I get pretty excited about those as well. And that company is called Revive, and it's based in Dubai and Manchester, UK.
That's great. I'll also plug in here the websites and of course disruption and innovation. I love it, Hap. Thank you very much yet again for your time, for wanting to inspire this other side of the globe, the Spanish speaking community. And I don't know, I wanted to end maybe this interview with a quote, a phrase, a mantra that you've had for your life, or something that you think would add value to the young entrepreneurs.
There's a quote from Goethe, the German philosopher, that I've hung on to, and I would advocate for other people. And it goes something like this. It said, whatever you can do or believe you can, begin it, because boldness has genius and power and magic in it.
Deep. I want to leave it like that. Thank you again for your time, for this value, and hope to see you soon. Or maybe you can also, if you visit us, please let us know here in